8:30 at night, 8:30 Arizona time, but I wanted to kind of share a little bit about uh, what we have here in the why reasons to believe, a video that I'm putting together and other things that I am putting together. What really has baffled me is as I study the scriptures, I have noticed that a lot of kids and teenagers and adults have a lot of questions of the Bible. So I look at a lot of debates. I look at a lot of things that are in the scriptures. I look at what do atheists believe? How to defend the faith? How to stand for the faith? What are certain questions? So I was watching this guy here. It was an atheist debate of Christian students, and this is pretty good because this school allows them to really hear the worldviews that they will know how to dispute it. But as I was listening to this guy, I thought, what? This is ridiculous. And I think Christians need to know how to defend the faith. Christians need to know how to speak, how to answer certain questions. So I have this playing at a 1.5 level. I'm hoping it's not too fast, but I'm going to stop it at certain times and ask some questions. So here's
At
this guy
university,
here.
so obviously work with university students normally. But when the opportunity came to come to a Christian school,
And I'm going to kind of
which is
talk
obviously
at the
very
same
different than
time.
what I teach at UCLA, I was like, sure, I'll share my story a little bit. And then we have two mics that roam around. You can ask me anything you'd like to ask me. So I teach philosophy, but I'm not a Christian. I didn't make the sign, but that's fine. Atheist encounter, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in a Christian home in Northern California, kind of outside of San Francisco. I used to go to church. I went on mission trips. Where I live, mission trips would like go down to Mexico, help the kids who were less fortunate there. I would read my Bible. I would share my faith. I even would get $10 tithing, or no, I get $10 allowance each week, and I would tithe like $1 in the allowance tray because that's what I was told, 10% to be a good Christian young man. I believe this story. But when I got to the university, I started encountering people with very, very different worldviews who had ideas I had never thought about before.
And that's really, when we think about our kids and teenagers and others, they will encounter different beliefs. This guy, he said, well, when I went to college, when I went to a university, then I encountered a lot of different types of beliefs. And this is very, very important because the problem is he didn't know how to defend his faith. He didn't know how to understand some of the stuff. Remember, he said he was raised as a Christian. He went to mission trips. He tithed. He did all his thing. He didn't really have a true relationship with Jesus Christ. He went through religion, and there's a big difference between a relationship with Jesus and a religion. Okay, and big difference. Okay, so let's continue listening in this guy.
And who were actually really smart in what they believed. I had a conversation with a student. I was a freshman, and she pressed back and asked me I had never thought about before as a Christian. My first thought was, well, this is what my pastor taught me. Well, this is what my parents taught me. This is what the Bible says. But then my fourth thought for me is what I would call a game changer. My fourth thought was, honestly, I really don't have a clue the answer to what you're talking about. I've just been told what to believe. I'm going to actually go research this, read both sides, and see where the truth leads. To make a long story short, after I started to read people with different worldviews, I came to the conclusion there's no good scientific evidence that God exists. There's no reason to think the Bible is true, let alone inspired. I mean, there's far too many contradictions and errors and mistakes in the Bible, not to mention things like misogyny and slavery and genocide to come from a holy God. And frankly, I'm not sure Jesus existed. He might have. But I think the Christian story is better explained as being patterned after these dying and rising gods of the ancient Near East. So I became an atheist. Now, I don't know, maybe some of you here are not Christians.
So let's start with a couple things here. I mean, this guy there's no scientific evidence, nothing that shows that there is a creation. Okay, so even though there is a lot of scientific evidence, a lot, folks, and especially if you're a teenager watching this, you need to understand that there's a lot of scientific that when people just make offhand comments like, oh, there's no scientific evidence that there's a creation, it's ridiculous because there's a lot of evidence of creation. There's a lot of evidence that of design, and design is the key factor to creation. The immune system, the solar system, all these systems that we have, our body, our everything about it, you can see that there is a designer. When you have a designer, when there's a design, you have to have a designer. How do you know there's a builder? When you see a building, The building exists. How do you know there's an artist when you see a picture? The picture exists. How do you know that there's a designer? The design exists. For us to say that there is no scientific evidence is ridiculous. And this guy was ridiculous for saying that there is no scientific evidence. A lot. The irreducible complexities, okay, of the eyeball, and how the eye uh, originated, how it microevolution of the eye, and how it, there's no way the irreducible complexities that an eye can even become evolved. Something had to create the eye. Something, it's like a lens. It is, the eye is so much more faster and powerful than a camera lens. And for us to believe that the eye, which is so perfect in the way it zooms in, zooms out, it focuses, and etc., and can look, and such complexities to it, to say that this is an evolution thing is like for me to say that a piece of hunk of metal was sat in the corner for millions of years, billions of years, and came out a computer. The eye is much more complicated than the computer, and there's no way anyone can ever think that some kind of hurricane hit a bunch of metal and we have now a computer or a camera. There's no way, impossible. So for us to say that there is no scientific evidence is a straight out lie, okay? This person obviously did not do his research. He wanted to believe what he wanted to believe, and then even claimed that people were smart. These guys were not smart. Even Jesus said, God himself says that these people call themselves wise are truly fools. Okay, let's go on.
I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. I know what it's like to be in a community when everybody else believes something different from you. So I wouldn't ask you to do that. But you could probably imagine if you stopped believing in the things your parents and community believed, that would upset the apple cart, wouldn't it? Like, it wasn't easy to start telling people, hey, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. Many were disappointed in me. Many thought like they had failed certain things. And I said, look, it's not your fault, Mom and Dad. I didn't blame my Bible teachers. I just have to follow what's true. And I don't think Christianity is true. In fact, I think it's harmful and dangerous and damaging to the world. Now, I guess I look at it like this. I'm guessing in your English and history
Okay,
classes,
so let's start.
how many of you have
So
studied
this guy, you can see this guy did not only just take the I don't believe in God, but he took the complete, like, he hates Christianity. He thinks it's harmful, it's dangerous, it's not true, it's dangerous, folks. Without Christianity, we'd be in a barbaric world. Barbarianism, okay? Barbarianism was before Christ. Barbarianism, there was no civilization. Okay. And if you remember what he said even earlier is, I had problems with the Bible, with slavery and all these, misogynism and all these things. Listen, who stopped slavery? It was Christians. It was Christians who stood against slavery. The wide world religion. Listen, I need you guys to understand this, because people need to understand that people like that have no brain. They have no clue. They call themselves wise, and then they think to themselves, oh, we're so wise because the Bible, it talks about slavery. It's, they had slavery and they had misogynism and they had all this stuff, they say, right? But think about it. Who stood to abolish slavery? It was Christians. What if Christianity didn't exist? What if there was no Christianity? Guess what, folks? Just like there's slavery right now in third world countries and different places, there'll still be slavery, because Christians are the ones who speak up. Christians are the ones who abolished slavery. Abraham Lincoln stood. Why? Because Abraham Lincoln was a man of God. He was a Christian. There were men who fought because they were Christians. They did not approve and want slavery. They did not believe in it. It was Christians who did this. Could you imagine if there were no Christians? Who would stop it? Who's stopping it in the Middle East right now? UN, the United Nations, they say, hey, countries are sovereign. They want to have. It's Christians who stood against slavery. This is the type of stuff that you have people who aren't thinking and aren't understanding the scriptures, and they're coming up with that type of belief. If you have any questions yourself or comments, you're more than welcome to state a comment on whether you're YouTube, if you're watching this, or on Facebook.
Greco-Roman gods, like Zeus and Poseidon. You know these stories. Okay, good. Almost all your hands are up. So, like, when the ancient Greeks could explain something like, say, earthquakes, what did they say was the cause? The gods are angry, right? But they couldn't explain something like, say, rain. What did they say was the cause? The gods are crying. No, gods don't cry. The goddesses were crying. That joke actually worked before the Wonder Woman movies, but it doesn't work anymore. Bottom line is, for the ancient Greco-Roman stories, they didn't understand why the ground moved. They lacked a scientific, natural explanation. So they inserted God as an explanation when they lacked a natural one. The problem with doing that, it's called God of the gaps, is as science advances, what happens? Those gaps get smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, where people used to think God acted, we can now explain it naturally. I think this is true for miracles. I think this is true for the stories of Jesus, etc. I don't believe in the supernatural. Now, just so look, if Christianity was true, I would believe it. I teach philosophy, so I train people how to think, how to recognize good thinking, how to follow truth, how to recognize bad thinking. So if Christianity were true, I would believe it. I'd love to believe in an afterlife.
So you can see very clearly this guy who calls himself, oh, I believe in philosophy, or I believe in these things. This is the type of stuff that you need to watch. Teenagers, college students, and etc. You guys need to watch out when you go to your colleges and you go to your universities and you go to your schools. These are the type of wolves that God talks to you about, that with fables and philosophies and things like, oh, well, I teach them how to think. I teach them how to decide. Obviously, this guy can't even think. And he can't even make assessments. He has a bias, and he calls his bias no God, no faith, no nothing, and then he goes on that bias, and he'll eat on that. Okay, let's continue.
Some kind of heavenly state. I just can't talk myself into believe something for which I don't find good evidence, and I find good evidence against it. Now, I could keep talking about my classes, my life, but I actually think it'd be more interesting. Your beloved teacher told me that you have interactions where he kind of role plays different worldviews, so you're used to this dialogue. I'd be happy to just take questions. What would you like to ask an atheist philosophy professor? And I'll do my best to respond. So if the two of you, I see you over there, I see Mr. O'Neill over here. If you hold your mic up, they'll just come follow you. Anything you want to ask a professor is fair game. If you guys will spread out, we'll get as many questions as possible. Let's do it.
Hi. So you like to talk about philosophical arguments, correct? So I would like to know what you think about the world and its creation as a whole philosophically, and how the world, if it's so fine-tuned to its creation, how something bigger or outside didn't create it.
Okay, so I heard the first part. What do I think about the origin of creation? Repeat the second part for me again, very quickly.
So fine-tuning, right? I'm sure you know what that is.
Oh, fine-tuning, yes.
Fine-tuning. So if the world was so specifically made, and we assume that a greater force out there had created it.
Can someone grab me my phone?
Okay, so let me jump in. So one is the question of, say, the origin of the universe, creation. Now, I don't think the universe was created. I don't believe in creation because that word implies a creator and a mind. That's the very thing I'm not convinced that actually exists. So I actually think the data shows while our universe had a beginning, when you look at string theory, you'll find what's called the multiverse. And if you're following the shows like WandaVision and other, and The Flash, like they toy in the multiverse. But there's actually good reason to believe. Sorry if I ruined it for some of you. Too bad. You had time. Do you know who saved Endgame? Can I ruin it for you? The multiverse, I think string theory. So our universe had a beginning, but I don't think the multiverse did. It's eternal and it's always been here. And there's reasons for that we could go into. Fine-tuning, if this were the only universe that existed, then I think we would be surprised that it happens to be so seemingly exquisitely fine-tuned to allow life. But since it's not, and there's more probabilistic resources in the universe, I don't see why fine-tuning is a problem. In fact, if there is a multiverse, we wouldn't expect to find ourselves in a universe that's not fine-tuned because we couldn't live in such a universe. We'd expect to find ourselves in the very kind of universe that we do find ourselves in.
Thank you. Let me stop right there. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure that I am coming across pretty clear on this, on our YouTube station here. So let's make sure. Here we go. And I'm coming in live. Just want to make sure. Pretty clear on this. Okay. On our YouTube station here. So okay, very good. Looks like it. Okay, so obviously this guy has come up with some kind of belief in the multiverse and creation, and he believes in the multiverse. I mean, this guy, if you listen to him, he says things like possibilities, and if there are possibilities, and if there are probabilities, and I mean, this takes more faith to believe that there's a multiverse, which he's got no evidence of, no evidence. He says things like the string theory, which is there's no evidence in establishing that. He uses things like the multiverse created this verse. Again, he'd rather go by Marvel and other shows and TV shows to believe that there's some kind of multiverse, even though there's no evidence of a multiverse, and it says things like probabilities and possibilities, while again goes to creation and says, oh, there is no God because there is absolutely no evidence. So you can see how an atheist believes one thing even though there's no evidence, he'd rather believe this no matter how much evidence you give them, no matter what, he still believes one way, okay, over the other. Let's watch, continue watching.
Oh, she can go again. I have no power here. I didn't meet you.
Yeah, no,
Let's see how this is.
So you pick specifically on the word choice of creator and creating. So whether or not we see that as God or something else, I just don't understand where you're coming from in the sense that thinking that this world isn't created, whether that be this universe or the multiverse as a whole.
Well, I don't think the universe had a beginning. The multiverse, that's really what I mean by the universe. I don't think it had a beginning, hence it doesn't need any cause outside of the universe. Now, if you say that the universe needs a creator, then why wouldn't the creator need a creator? Why could the creator just exist, but the universe can't? That would be my question. So if you're going to be consistent, either they both need some kind of cause, or they both just exist. You believe God just exists. I believe the universe just exists, so minimally we're at an impasse. Good question. Anybody else? I see one up here.
Right.
Any others? Spread out, even while they're talking. There's one
so
up
Mr.
top in
Stewart
there.
was supposed to be the downstairs guy, but I guess I'll do both, Mr. Stewart.
All right, we'll try to get in as many as we can, so keep your hands up, and they'll come to you. Shh. Go ahead.
So you said earlier you weren't even sure if Jesus was a real person. I'm not talking about like if he was God or like bending. Like you said you weren't sure if he was real.
He might have been. I think the evidence is late and contradictory and legend filled, so I'm not fully convinced.
So the legend filled, would that be like the Roman who believed in the like his gods and everything else would be blasphemy and he'd hate everything? Even him saying that he was a real person is based on legend. That's why I just wanted.
Wait, Jesus saying he's a real person would be legend?
No. So the.
Okay, just so you guys understand, this guy doesn't believe that Jesus was a real person. I want you to understand, look at this question that's about to be asked of him, and look how he resorts to this question here on this.
Roman saying Jesus existed and Jesus was a person.
Well, there's no good early Roman source that does.
Josephus.
Josephus was Jewish, for one.
It was a Roman historian.
Second, he was writing for Rome, but he was not Roman. Josephus was
That's my
Jewish.
mistake.
Josephus mentions 33 people by the name of Jesus. 33 people. Have you read the Antiquities of the Jews?
I've not read that yet.
Okay, so listen, that's all right. I would encourage you to read it. It's like saying somebody referred to Mike or John today. Jesus was a very common name in the Jewish world because it refers to Joshua, like a savior. So yeah, he refers to a bunch of people by the name of Jesus, but that's hardly reference to the historical biblical Jesus. Second reason I don't trust Josephus is in Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 18. Josephus allegedly refers to Jesus as risen on the third day, crucified, performing miracles, and being the Messiah. Would any Jew believe that?
Okay, that's a... Okay, so let's start with, first of all, the kid tells this guy, what about the Roman historian? He says there's no Roman historians out there that would have... Well, first of all, there's a couple Roman historians that spoke about Jesus. Let's get that. But this kid says, well, what about Josephus, okay, which is an accredited historian? And this guy goes, well, so Josephus wasn't a Jew, wasn't a Roman. And he goes, he was a Jew. He goes, okay, well, he was writing for Rome. He was hired by Rome as a Jew to file history. And this guy is writing Roman history. Okay, he's writing whether Jewish history and Roman history, is writing history. And then he goes, well, he mentioned Jesus, but there was many other Jesuses out there. Obviously, he has not read Josephus, because if he did, he'd probably be like, okay, well, Jesus is a real person. Because no, even though Jesus may have been a common name to him, there is only one Jesus that was referred to as Christos. As Christos. And in the Jewish historian is Christos. And then there was only one Jesus that he says that Josephus wrote about, that allegedly died, or said that Jesus, Christos, died, was buried, and on the third day rose from the dead. Okay? Which, this is what Josephus wrote. And Josephus wrote it in this context. This is what happens when you want to put your own type of belief. Josephus wrote it in this context. He said that there were believers, there were these people who followed Christos, who said that he was crucified by the Roman Pontius Pilate, was buried, and on the third day rose from the dead. These are facts. And they are facts from then on. They weren't 100 years later or 300 years later. This was present facts, presently. Now, if Josephus believed that these guys were lying, it would have been very easy for Josephus to wrote, these guys must have been delusional because there was no man named Jesus who was crucified or buried or rose from the dead. But he doesn't write that. He knows that there was a man named Jesus, that they believe that there were believers named him the Christ. Then he goes on and he says the worst fumble, I think probably one of the most worst fumbles you can have, is he says something like, which he's a Jew. What Jew? I don't believe Josephus because what Jew would believe that Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose from the dead on the third day? Well, let me just start to say Peter, John, James, Thomas, Nathaniel, Philip, Andrew, the Apostle Paul, and many other Jews who believed in Jesus Christ. Many Jews at that time had come to believe that Yeshua was the Messiah. Hello? Is this guy just totally like what Jews came to believe? Does he know anything about Christian persecution in Israel? Is that just a figment of imagination? That's like me saying that the Holocaust never existed and Germans never put the Jews in concentration camps. Are you kidding me? If I were to say something like that, that would make me look so stupid. And for someone to say that there were no Christians and that Christianity didn't exist and there were no believers of this Jesus, and would be just like saying that Jews persecuted Christians because they believe Yeshua was the Messiah. This was written in secular biblical history and secular history, folks, not just the Bible. What we have in the Bible, in the doctrines, are not just there. This is very important to teach your kids so that when they go to universities and they come across some heathen, wicked man like this guy here or others like him who try to tell our children that there was no Jesus and he never existed, that our kids can look at people like that and go, you're whack. Why are you even a teacher? Everyone knows that historically there was a man named Yeshua and that he had disciples who believed himself to be the Christ. This is very historical. So our children, our youth, our college kids, and etc. need to know how to answer people like this, that there are outside sources outside of the Bible that do believe that Jesus was the Christ, etc. So let's go on.
The answer is no. Jew by religion. Josephus is not quoted for the first 8 centuries of the church. It's not really the 10th century that any church historian quotes Josephus, because the passage that allegedly refers to Jesus was tweaked and interpolated and not actually written by Josephus. Yeah. Hey, good
Which,
question.
by the
Yeah,
way, he has no proof of that. He has absolutely no proof of that.
So, you said that the universe wasn't created, but how do you know that it wasn't created if we know that it is constantly dying? Like, we know that universe is expanding, right? So, and energy is dispelling every second. Like, how do you know that it is... Sorry, the microphone's so weird. It's fine, sorry. How do you know that it is endless if the universe is constantly dying?
Okay, let me jump in for a second. Because the echo makes it kind of hard to hear, state your question distinctly and clearly. And the first one was, if the universe is expanding, wouldn't it have had a beginning? Well, there's 2 things that can be said to this. Number one is there's good reason to believe we have an expanding and a contracting universe, kind of like a xylophone. And how would we believe this? Because as we look out further into the universe, we see red-shifted stars, which tell us on the longer wavelength of light that the universe is expanding. We also have some blue-shifted stars, which tells us that there's also contraction. So yeah, the universe expands, but I think it's also contracting as well.
But if it's expanding, shouldn't it be from the one point? Like from a single point? It should expand from somewhere.
Why did the universe have to come from something? Then you have to ask that question for God. Where did God come from?
Well...
Okay, so let me say this. What this guy is saying is very, very important. He's saying, look, if the universe is expanding or even contracting, however, there had to have been a beginning. There had to have been a starting point. If energy, he didn't even answer this question, if energy is being displaced, there has to start from somewhere. Okay? For example, if I feel this room is getting colder, well, it must have been hotter at one moment. At what point was that hot point? Where was that beginning? Okay, and for someone like, for him to say, well, this is the way it works, the way it is, and it's always been, he's saying there has to have been a starting point. See, the starting point is God creating. That the universe didn't always just exist, or it was part of a multiverse of some whatever hocus pocus, Spider-Man, DC, Marvel type of Looney Tune type of belief, but rather there is a creation, and though even the universe expanding or contracting, there has to be something controlling the expanding and contracting and expelling energy. For example, let me give you another one. If I'm here and I'm feeling that this room is getting cooler, and I start timing, okay, it's getting cooler every 5 minutes, eventually there will come a time when this room will be completely cold in however time it is. Okay? Now, if I say, wow, this room is getting colder every 5 minutes, if we were to measure this room, eventually this room will become very cold and all the heat will be gone. It's not going to last forever. There has to, if it goes down, and it's done. So if we're talking about a world that they're saying, oh, we've been here billions of years, and it's just the way it is, then why are we not bigger, and why are we not smaller, and why is not energy so displaced? If it's past its limits, it should have been so displaced by the time we are at now. Okay, so it's kind of like evaporating water. Water's, we put it out in the sun, we can see it evaporating. Eventually it will evaporate. And if I had it out there for a week, that water should be gone. If this world was billions and billions of years, as they discuss, our energy should be gone. The world should have slowed down by now, because we also know that the world is slowing down. We also know that the world is coming, expanding too big or contracting. Either way, there has to be an end if we are believing that there is no creation or there is no someone controlling it and it's by itself. That's what he's saying here. And this guy will skirt around it, believe me.
The universe was created and then it started to expand from one point.
I'm not sure I'm fully tracking, maybe because of the sound, but we have reason to believe the universe is expanding and contracting. If there was a beginning to this, you're still only dealing with our universe, not the multiverse. So it doesn't get us all the way to an explanation that would require God.
So again, he goes back to the multiverse. Oh, what are you going to do with our universe, not the multiverse? And then he says, well, then where did God come from? Who cares where does God come from? What does God have to do with figuring out where God came from or where God originated from? Has absolutely no bearing on anything. To answer the question, when you listen, kids, youth, college students, adults, when someone comes to you and says, well, where did God come from? Who cares? What's the matter where God come from? If I were to tell you where he came from, would it change your mind? Would it change your mind? Would you suddenly believe in God if I told you where he came from? If I gave you a story that at one time there were many gods, and this one God beat them all, and he became king over all, and he killed them all, and he started this universe, would you believe that? Or would you then go, well, where did all those gods came from? What's it matter? We can go to infinity. Where did infinity to infinity to infinity come in from? We can go on and on and on and on if you really wanted to. It doesn't matter. The point comes down to, if a person wants to really entertain that thought, well, where did God come from? They'll never be satisfied no matter how much you tell them. If you were to say, well, God came from here, let me show you the directions of where he came from, they're never going to be satisfied. It doesn't matter. Because to them it doesn't. Just to say God always is. He was the beginning. He created all things. Where did he come from? It doesn't matter. He didn't need a creator. He is God. How do we know? We don't understand where or what. It doesn't matter where he came from. It matters that it is here. When our kids go to the refrigerator and they want to grab the milk, they don't go, well, before I grab this milk, where did it come from? They don't know. They don't know where it came from. They may know, well, they don't know. All they know is that mom and dad put the milk in the refrigerator. And to them, that's all that's important. They didn't want to know if it's from Fry's or from Walmart or from Safeway or Albertson or Vons or wherever you go shopping at. All they want to know is that mom and dad provided that. That's all they care about. And that's all we should care about, is there is a God.
That's my question.
And one other thing, we do not need to answer where God came from to know that God created all things.
Good. All right. I see a hand down here. I see a few in the back. Again, just if you don't mind, get as quickly to your question and distinctly as you can. Please.
Okay, so earlier when you were addressing Madison's question,
while we're talking, go ahead and pull your mask off, then we can hear.
So earlier while you were addressing Madison's question, you noted that the multiverse had to be an eternal type thing in order for the beginning of our universe to be created. So going off of that, do you believe that the components of something created needs to be in that which created it? So like, for example, with the creation of our world, we have intellectual minds. And from that, with the multiverse, how did the intellectual minds initiate or develop through something that didn't have that property?
Okay, so if I understand, you're asking the question of consciousness. How did a universe that seemingly at the beginning was physical do things like minds emerge through that process?
Yes.
Did I capture your question?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yes, the universe is physical. Wait, don't leave yet, because you might want to follow up. But there's certain capacities for what are called emergent.
Let me clarify her question that she's saying. It's in order for the universe, for our universe, and she's kind of basing off what he's saying. Wait a minute here. She's saying, if in order for us to have come from a multiverse, shouldn't some of the multiverse elements also be in our universe today? Okay, that's really the question, and that's a very good question, because the answer is yes. If we really did come from a multiverse, we should have evidence that there is a multiverse. Okay? And it's a very good question. But look at how he answers the question.
Properties at the right level of complexity and diversity to emerge. So take, for example, hydrogen and oxygen. They're two physical molecules or elements. You put them together and you have water. Now, a new property emerges called wetness. It doesn't exist just in hydrogen, doesn't exist just in oxygen, but somehow when these two physical properties emerge, these two elements emerge, you have this new property develop out of it. I think the same is true when it comes to the emergence of consciousness, that at a certain level of complexity, this new element, it's an epiphenomenon of consciousness.
Sorry about that. Notice that he says, I think. Notice that he says, I think. Not that I know, but I think. And then notice also how he says hydrogen and oxygen. Well, and they're put into, there's wetness. Well, if you look at the wetness and you were to examine the wetness, you would still see the two molecules or the two elements that make it, the oxygen and the hydrogen. Well, again, that only proves what this girl was saying. That, well, we should see, if we were to examine the universe we have now, we should be able to see the two elements that have made this new property. The thing is, we don't.
Emerges like wetness. And what's interesting is you look throughout the evolutionary history of our world, and you can see simpler organisms aren't really conscious, but there's a basic awareness of pain. And then you have consciousness, and then you have self-consciousness. You have this increasing complexity go on as the evolutionary story unfolds.
Hogwash. Just straight out hogwash.
All right, we're going to jump up here. Go ahead.
If you don't follow an afterlife or a sort of meaning of life right now, a sort of greater purpose, where do you personally and where do you suggest others find vocational motivation?
That's a good question. So let me answer this in a couple ways. I would presume, correct me if I'm wrong, you believe purpose is top down, that God has made this world, he infuses it with purpose, and we find our purpose in God in some fashion. Is that fair?
Fair, yeah.
Okay, I think purpose comes from the bottom up. I don't think there's a God. I don't think there's a grand design. But as we look at this amazing story of evolutionary history, we have things like friendship, we have good food, we have knowledge, we have freedom. These are all good things that give our lives purposes, even if there is no God that exists. And I think as we look at human beings across different cultures, we find this common recognition that our lives can be purposeful even if there's no afterlife or they differ about God.
So, say if everything dies, if everything eventually will end, then why continue at all?
Why continue at all? Because I don't win in the end?
Correct.
Okay. Think about it this way. How many football players do we have here? Let me see your hands. Let me see hands. Football players. Okay. If we...
And he's pretty much answering asking the age-old question. Well, if there's no purpose and we lose at the end, why not eat, drink, and be merry? Like, if there's no afterlife, why go through all this? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of food and relationship? What's all that purpose if it's nothing but instinct? Okay? There's no afterlife.
He said, tomorrow, we're having a scrimmage against the Kansas City Chiefs. Even though you're going to lose, actually, they got smokes. You might beat them. Let's go with the Buccaneers, okay? If you're going to play the Buccaneers, is there any chance you're going to win? The answer is no. You effectively have zero chance of winning, maybe negative chance. How many football players would be like, I don't care. I get to get on the field with Tom Brady and with the Buccaneers. I'm playing anyways. How many of you would still play because you want to get on the field with those guys, right? That'd be awesome. So even though you can't win, so to speak, in the end, it doesn't mean that experiences are not valuable.
Okay, so valuable to what? Experiences are valuable to what? If you're not going to win at the end, would you still go out there? Yeah, because there'll be a new purpose. And that new purpose or that new value that you're looking at is being able to experience to be with the Buccaneers or to what do you call it, against the Buccaneers. So yeah, there would be a purpose and there would be a value on those things. So this guy's reasoning is, again, what's that all about? You know what I mean? Why go through all that? So there is a value when it comes down to that point.
In fact, I would actually say, as an atheist, my life is finite. It's not infinite. So I think this life has more value because this is all I have. So I don't get this morning back. I don't think I live for infinity, and I spend it with you guys. That tells me I think there's something important about thinking and relationships and growing. So not believing in God, I think, actually makes life more purposeful and meaningful.
Okay, so again, you can see how he has twisted his own understanding to think that not to believe in God makes your life more purposeful. Because he's saying, well, if there's no afterlife, then this is it. I'm going to cherish this. I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to focus on this because there is no afterlife. There is nothing else. What a miserable, miserable way of looking at things. Let me tell you something. Here's how I look at it. If I was fed lunch and they said to me, this is it. This is your last meal. This is your lunch. It doesn't matter how good that lunch is or how much lunch I have and how delicious it is. And you're like, well, I'm not going to sit there and savor the lunch so much. I'm going to think, man, this is miserable, because I know that once I get done with this lunch, which I eventually will, no matter how great it is, no matter how delicious it is, there is nothing else. And that's what makes it miserable. And my lunch that I'm eating is going to be miserable because I know that's it. Once I'm done with this, I'm done. So for him to think that, oh, this is life and I'm going to cherish this even more because I know there's nothing, I mean, that is a miserable way of living, because again, you get to a point of thinking, well, gosh, this is it. This is it. What if it's not good? What if we're not having a joyful life? This guy may be having a good life. He has a career and everything. But what about people who aren't, or who are miserable, who are sick, who are dying? Are they looking at their life going, this is it? This is not worth it. I'm going to die. I might as well eat and drink and be merry. A drug addict. Why should a drug addict get clean? Why, if there is no afterlife, why tell a person who's on drugs to get clean? Why? Well, so that he can enjoy life. You don't think he's enjoying life now? Why don't you just give him drugs? The only thing he's not enjoying is how to get the drugs. But as long as he's getting the drugs, he's enjoying it. Why about an alcoholic? Someone who drinks? Well, that's because if he's not going to enjoy life, He's enjoying life. The only thing this guy doesn't enjoy or this girl doesn't enjoy when they're on drugs or on alcohol is not them actually doing it. They're not enjoying having to get it. I can assure you, if you give a druggie or an alcoholic all the alcohol they want or all the drugs they want, they will love life until they eventually die, and that's it. That's it. And if that's what life is about, why aren't we all on drugs and alcohol and just saying getting it for free? Because if we eat, drink, and be merry, there's no afterlife. What's the purpose of life? This is the type of stuff these people feed our children. This is the type of reason why people look at life and they feel like there's no hope. There's no hope. This guy may think there's hope, but what they're feeding is hopelessness to our children and to our youth. And that is what makes us sick and tired of these college professors, these people who are feeding junk to our kids. That's the problem we have. Hopelessness.
Over here, I want to make sure people can follow up with their questions as well. I don't want to filibuster here. Oh, okay, go ahead.
So if the Bible contains hundreds of prophecies fulfilled after they were written, even being fulfilled, like as of now in the 21st century, how would that be possible without an omniscient God?
So give me one example of a prophecy you think, like the virgin birth or something, or which?
No, like the measuring of Israel in the end times.
Which one?
Measuring of Israel in the end times.
Okay, we can't deal with something in the end times because it hasn't been fulfilled yet.
Well, it's being fulfilled now.
So give me an example of a prophecy prophesied ahead of time that was distinctly fulfilled that you think is supernatural.
I mean, you could go with the birth of Jesus or the crucifixion of Jesus.
Birth of Jesus or the crucifixion of Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the birth of Jesus, okay, since you started there. When that prophecy was written, according to you, before Jesus came on the scene, in the book of Micah, correct?
I believe so.
It is correct. So, Jesus claims to be the Messiah. Would he have been aware of this prophecy?
Are you asking me a question?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so, yeah.
Well, of course he was, right? In Luke chapter 2, Jesus knew the law so well, even the leaders reflected upon this, okay? I don't think Jesus is real. I'm telling the story from your perspective. Jesus would have known this prophecy. So if he's trying to proclaim himself as the Messiah, do you think by the time he's 33, 3 decades removed from this, he would start telling people that he's from the area of Bethlehem, and later followers who believe this would start telling that as well? The answer is, of course. So I would need some actual proof that he's from that area and didn't invent this like he did other prophecies to believe it's really supernatural. And the evidence that Jesus is from Bethlehem outside of the Gospels only emerges in the 3rd century, 300 years removed. So I don't.
Okay, so what he's saying is that Jesus's birth was in Bethlehem. This was prophesied that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. And I know this video is long. I know some of you are probably watching it live right now. Maybe some of you guys will hit tidbits on it. Maybe these are things you might give your kids to watch one day. I know my kids will be watching this and understanding some things. There'll be questions that these kids are asking, same thing that they'll have to deal with this guy. Maybe you have to watch this in sections, 20 minutes here, 10 seconds here, 30 minutes there, 20 seconds, put it on fast speed, okay? You'll be watching me on fast speed on YouTube, and then you'll be really hearing this. But here's what he's saying. He's saying that after Jesus was going through his ministry, he started telling people, hey, I was born in Bethlehem. Like as if Jesus was telling other people that he was born in Bethlehem. And that Jesus, like for example, let's say for example for me, if I were to say, I'm the Messiah, and they're like, really? You're the Messiah? And I go, yes, I was born in Bethlehem. You were? Yep. And my mom was a virgin, and I gave birth, and so I'm telling you the whole story about me, and you're like, wow, this is like exactly like prophecy. You must be the Messiah because your story is exactly as prophesied. And what he's saying is that's exactly what Jesus and his disciples did, okay? This Jesus who didn't exist, by the way. This Jesus was telling people things, he's saying 300 years later, was telling things that Jesus never really existed or never really did. But he's saying, where's the proof? All right, well, first of all, again, this goes back to show how ignorant these people are. This guy is ignorant. He just needs to shut up, go back, read the Bible, understand the scriptures. The script, first of all, the Gospel of Luke was an investigative writing. And that, first of all, shows that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Investigative writing. Not, this is after Jesus. After Jesus was born, raised, crucified, resurrected. Luke became a believer after Jesus was gone, long gone. He went back to investigate what had happened. Also, they forgot that during the time of Herod, there was a great death where in Bethlehem children were slaughtered from 2 years and under. This is recorded in history, where where Herod had killed all the kids from 2 and under, which was prophesied. It was prophesied in Jeremiah. It was prophesied that the children from Rachel crying for her children, mourning for her children. Again. So what do you mean? Geez, why would... what about the Magi who came from the east, who went, and when they said, well, where would the Messiah be born? Where do those guys come from? There is record of them. How do we just ignore all that and just think that Jesus made up a story when there was all these Magi, Micah, the death of children 2 years and under, and all these things happening? You can't. You can't. And this is what happens when you are ignorant to the Bible and you don't want to read the Bible. This guy should be reading the Bible, and he should wake up and read a little bit so that he come to understand. Maybe he might become a believer. Hopefully maybe you'll watch my video and say, wow, maybe, you know what? You're right. Josephus was a Jewish historian and a Roman historian. He did speak about Christos. Wait a minute. Yeah, the slaughtering of the children 2 and under, and Herod, and why did Jesus make up that story too? And 300 years later, what are you talking about? The Gospels were written way before 300 years. We don't have a gospel that 300 years later they came up with this thing. As a matter of fact, Paul writes in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, one of the very first creeds. According to, this is the gospel which you received, and I received, and I pass on to you, that Jesus was crucified for our sins, was buried, and he rose from the dead. You know, this is all evidence. And he did. He did. You're right, Harlan. He did. He probably read it and probably didn't understand. He probably read it and did not understand. So he wants to think, oh, well, Jesus never was born. Jesus didn't come up with these later. This is what the writers spoke, that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and there was a lot of historical evidence that this, so he just doesn't want to believe it, or he just doesn't understand it, like you said.
I don't buy it. You can give me another example, we could talk about it. But either the prophecies, you have people writing the New Testament, reading back on the Old Testament, pulling things out of context, like the virgin birth. If you actually read Isaiah 7 on the virgin birth, it has nothing to do with the Messiah. And the Hebrew word is for a young girl, not even a virgin. And the New Testament writers apply that as if to Jesus.
Okay, so again, goes to show the ignorance of this. A young girl, not really a virgin. Well, we're not in America. They weren't in America. When they talked about a virgin, they talked about a young girl. A young girl still had her virginity. And this is a young girl. That's why they translate the word virgin, because she's a young girl, non-married, not married. So it was a given. So if you look at context, this is why you don't eisegesis something, you exegesis it, and to show that when they said virgin, or if it was translated young girl, even if it was, it would mean, again, someone who has not had children. A person who's had children would not be translated young girl, because she's no longer a young girl. She's a woman, or she's a mother. Okay, so this is a virgin. All right, and back then, girls weren't just having sex before marriage. They weren't floozies, okay, and just doing whatever they wanted to do. Not that having sex before marriage makes you a floozy per se. I mean, I'm sure you understand everyone understands what I mean, okay? When they understood that sex belonged in marriage only, and it was a sin to have it before or an adulterous situation. That meant murder, death.
And it was never implied that way in the Old Testament. Or people like Jesus intentionally try to fulfill him because they're aware of him, and he's trying to convince people he's the Messiah. But you also have some false prophecies we could talk about if you wanted to as well. Like when Jesus says, his return, people in this generation will see it. well, we're at least 20 generations after this plus, and Jesus still hasn't come back. So I don't buy the positive prophecies, and I think there's examples of false prophecies.
Okay, first of all, again, out of context, exegesising it, eisegesising it. He's not talking about his return. He's talking about death, his burial, and his resurrection, his return from the dead, that people in this generation will see it. And they did. They saw Jesus when he says, destroy this temple in 3 days, I will raise it up. Again, was this temple destroyed? Yeah, his body, but they didn't understand it was his body. Same thing when it came back to Jesus's resurrection and his return, okay, from the dead. Again, eisegesis, not exegesis. And when you have eisegesising things, you can make your scriptures believe whatever you want it to believe, even saying that it's a false prophecy. Let's go on.
Is this on? Ooh, that's loud. Hi. I'd just like to say thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And from here, it looks like you have a wedding ring on. Are you married?
Am I married? This is getting really personal.
Just answer.
Just answer. Wow.
Yes, sir. What is your standard for love? If you have no foundation in Jesus, I see no reason to love people at all. So what's your standard?
Well, okay, shh. I can tell you my standard is not Jesus, because despite what people say, he did and believed a lot of things we all know are not loving. And I'll give you some examples of this. Supposedly there's demons. Wait, don't leave. She might want to follow back up. Don't leave her. Oh, you do have the mic. Supposedly there's demons, and instead of casting them out, he runs them into a herd owner's pigs and sends, 2,000 pigs into the ocean. Like, why would Jesus, if he was God, he didn't have to ruin the guy's herd. That didn't sound very loving to me.
Well, again, let me just see, this is the problem we have with people like this who don't get it. All right? Yeah. See, if a person doesn't understand scripture, this is why they're mixed up. Listen, adults, kids, youth, again, when you go to colleges and you go to high schools and you encounter these fake professors who are demonic, they just don't get it. They're just a little bit on cuckoo. He thinks that Jesus is sending the demons into the pigs was mean to the pig farmers, okay? But he doesn't realize that the pig farmers, even raising pigs in a Jewish community, was an insult to the Jewish community, okay? And what Jesus was really doing was sending these demons into the pigs and driving them into the sea where they belong, because those pig farmers, who's eating pork? Who's eating pigs? Who's eating bacon? Not the Jews. And for them to have a pig farm right there among the Jews is an insult. They were considered dirty. And yet these guys doing this, so what Jesus actually did was loving. Could you imagine a community that saw all these pigs run into the thing and kill and be dead? They were probably like, yes, we got rid of those drug dealers. Pretty much. Okay, that's what was happening here. This guy doesn't get it. He doesn't get it.
Second, Jesus believes in the Old Testament. And you look at a lot of the violence in the Old Testament, that's hardly the kind of thing a loving God would do.
Okay, so now he goes on and say the violence in the Old Testament? What about the violence in all the world? For us to say the violence in the Old Testament, that's not a loving God to do. Was there not, are we saying that humanity is not loving at all? We've had wars and fights and we've conquered nations and countries and bloodshed and the Civil War. The Civil War. Are we to say that all the Union soldiers that killed all the Southern soldiers showed no love? There was no love? That our country shows no love and there is no country in this world that has love because of violence? That's a ridiculous assumption. That's a ridiculous conclusion to believe that because there's violence or because God says go and do this. He didn't understand God's will and the ultimate end of that. Go and remove this wickedness and kill this wickedness from the nation so that your people can thrive. So God allowed it so that because these people were wicked. These people were killing their children. They were worshiping false gods. They were doing wrong things, and God sent his people to annihilate them in many instances. So for this guy to even come up to some assumption that there was violence and that's not a loving God is a false assumption, false conclusion.
So I don't look to the Bible for love. Now, are there some things Jesus taught that were good? Sure. Like loving your enemies, that's a pretty powerful teaching he taught. I'm okay with that. My standard of love doesn't come from some ancient book written 2,000 years ago. It comes from common sense and reflection on how human beings best flourish. So I just look at my wife and I say, what words can I say that are kind to her? How can I treat her respectfully? How do I be a good husband? How do I be a good dad? How do I be faithful to her? Like these, you might say these are Christian values, but they're also Buddhist values. They're also Hindu values. That's because they're human values. So I don't need an ancient book to know what it means to love my wife.
Folks, let me just say this. I've studied Hinduism and Buddhism, and that is not Hindu beliefs and Buddhist. Hindu and Buddhist believes in personal nirvana. They don't believe in external nirvana. Well, I'm sorry. Hindu believe external to internal. Buddha believes internal to external, okay? Within yourself, okay? But it's all selfish. Buddhism and Hinduism is all about internal, about your own nirvana, your own things, okay? Now, as for love, love is an objective. So this guy thinks that love is just some kind of like, oh, love, I learn it by myself. I receive it for myself. Guys, love is not love. Just to say you have love is not love. For example, I love my wife. And just because I say I love my wife, that love is good love. It's a godly love. But just because I use the word love and I may truly say I love it, doesn't make it right, because there's a wrong love. For example, a 30-year-old loving a 14-year-old. 14-year-old loving a 30-year-old. That's not love. Folks, we cannot, but they love one another. That is not love. You cannot objectively call that love, because it's not love. Love is, it uses the object of which is loved. If I love something that is wrong, that love is wrong. So just because you say love does not mean make it right. Love is dependent upon the object of which you love. So if I love something and that object is not good to love, that love is not good. Same-sex marriage. Two men love one another. That love is not good, because the object is two men or two women. The objects make that love wrong. So they need to realize and understand that love is based on object. Now, what happens if you take God out of the equation? Then love becomes generic, and love has no object, and love cannot determine itself. It's not self-governed. In that case, then a 30-year-old and a 14-year-old is fine. Man and man, women, man to beast, women to beast. Okay? I mean, you can't just suddenly stop love. Who's saying that love is wrong if there is no God? If it's all objective on society, then society decides what is right and what is wrong. But someone has to say, no, that's wrong. There's true love and there's real love, and that has to come from God and God alone. So for this guy to think, well, I don't have to learn love from anyone. I know love, because he doesn't know love. God is love. And he's a real love and a true love. Because the object of his affection and his love is humanity, and he loves humanity. And he's given humanity the standard of love. And you put different bad objects in that love, you got a problem. So love is not always love. It's not always good love. It's not always right love if the objects are wrong on there.
In fact, I think that ancient book wouldn't help me because of the way it treats women, but separate issue. Go ahead. Are you done?
That ancient book won't help me by the way it treats women. Again, guys, anyone who's been at Harvest knows, as we just read 1 Corinthians 11, 13, 14, 15 about how it treats women. It doesn't treat them as second-class citizens like society has. This person is so angry because he has the wrong understanding of what Christianity is, that he comes up. I almost am embarrassed to even go any further. I might even go 10 more minutes with him, because he's, again, clearly off his rocker, and he's clearly not even understanding scripture. And for me to debate someone like him just seems like it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's ridiculous. Okay?
Done, or did you want to come back? Are you married? Definitely not.
So if you believe in things from a scientific standpoint, you do, right? Like scientific?
I couldn't quite make that out.
Do you believe in things from a scientific perspective? Like the creation and life? You based around science?
I honestly, for some reason, the echo, I believe what?
Do you believe in creation from a scientific perspective?
Do I believe creation from a scientific perspective? I don't believe creation from any perspective.
Okay. Well, then what are your thoughts on just like the law of conservation of matter and how things can't be created or destroyed? You said how you think the universe is constantly expanding.
Okay, so slow down. The first law of thermodynamics, which you call the law of conservation of energy, says that matter is neither created nor destroyed, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Who believes matter was created, you or me?
Well, I was thinking you, because you
No,
talked about...
I just said I don't believe matter was created, because that implies a creator. Are you a Christian? You believe in God?
Yes.
So you believe matter was created. The
Yes.
first law that you cited says matter is neither created nor destroyed. That's not a problem for me. I don't think it was created or destroyed. I say, yep, that's scientific fact. You're the one who believes it was created.
So how do you think the universe is expanding without matter being created?
How is it expanding?
You said it, how you thought the universe was...
Oh, that's easy. Put buttons on a balloon. If you expand the balloon, what happens? The buttons get further and further from one another. There's not more matter. It's an expansion of the existing matter.
So it's just more empty space growing?
Well, yeah, you could look at it that way. It gets more precise than that. But yeah, it's not the constant creation of matter for the universe to expand. It's a different relationship of the existing matter. That's it.
Okay.
Hey, good questions, by the way. Very thoughtful. Back there, go.
Hi, my name is Olivia. It's very nice to meet you. Okay, so you have said repeatedly throughout today that you believe in science, yes?
Broadly, yes, sure.
Broadly, okay, so we'll take that. So I was wondering, when a trial or tribulation, per se, comes into your life, how do you explain the origin of that? And how do you endure that as an atheist?
A trial or tribulation?
If something happens, let's say a death or
got
something
it.
that you can't really,
Or like
there's no explainable reason
something
for it.
totally unforeseen, like a pandemic or something like that. How do I deal
Sure,
with it?
something
Okay.
unfair.
So because I embrace science as a means of knowing the world, doesn't mean I only embrace science as a means of knowing and experiencing the world. That's what's called scientism. I don't embrace scientism. I think it's a testable, powerful way that's given us medicine, communications, transportation, etc. So when something like a pandemic hits, I don't go to the Bible. I turn to science because science has given us vaccines. Science is testing whether masks work. It was scientists who, at the bubonic plague, said, this isn't a condemnation from God. Maybe there's a scientific explanation, viruses, bacteria, let's figure it out, that led to helping mankind. Now, personally, what do? I turn to family, I turn to friends, I turn to other human beings who help us through this. And we have helped each other. That's what it means to be human, to be a collective species.
Okay, so if you don't believe, because I believe, I think a lot of us believe in science in addition to what we personally believe, just as you do, so then what else do you believe in? Because you said that you turn to your family and your friends and everything else, but I believe that there is something that can't be verbalized about humanity. There's something that we feel that's a little inexplicable, and being a Christian, I believe that it has Christian origin. What do you, in addition to science, believe to be an explanation?
So I understand.
Okay, so in short, and I think I'm going to end here because this guy is getting kind of very ridiculous, and I might bring up another apologist, maybe somebody a little bit more learned than him, or someone who's got some kind of Bible understanding of some sort, something that I can debate, because even these high school kids here are asking him questions, and he's coming back and he's not even answering it right. And I'm gonna call this guy Wolf, and these King's Academy. I know that they brought him in, and I think it's kind of good that they did. Let me see here. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward because I just saw something here. I just want to kind of stop right here. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that, guys. Let me bring him up here because I've been saying a lot of trash about him, but maybe let me figure this out here. Here we go.
Compare him.
There we go.
All right. Good question. All right, so here's the deal. We're running out of time. So I'm going to take the last 15 minutes and tell you about what I really do. I'm not a philosophy professor. I'm not an atheist. I actually teach at a Christian university in Southern California, a private school called Biola. And I teach at a private Christian school part-time as well, high school Bible. I am married to my high school sweetheart, first met her in 3rd grade, so I'm not a bad guy. I do this a lot at different schools. Usually I set people up and let them know I'm a Christian first. But where are you? Where are you, Mr. Stewart? Oh, he left. He's like, I'm out of here now that he's revealing the truth. Oh, there you are. We're like, let's just see what happens if we set them up and make them think that I'm an atheist first, see if that changes the nature of the dynamic. So I'm a Christian. I'm actually an apologist. This is what I do. I've written, 15 or 20 books. I teach apologetics at a graduate program at Biola University. I speak and I debate atheists and others because I think it's fun. How many of you honestly were like, I knew it? No, you weren't. Like 6 or 7 of you. All right.
There is, first of all, there is no way I even knew it. He taught me good.
All right. Okay, so here's the deal. We only have about 15.
So you can see how frustrated I was even getting. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This guy was ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. But you know what? Let me tell you something. There are people who are still like him. Not like him. Obviously, he's a Biola. But he was asking, the questions that he was, I know, I'm shocked too. The questions that he was actually saying were things that our high school students, our college students, and others are listening to. This is what's making people turn away from the faith, because they go into these universities. And this is real. While this guy, he's an apologist also. He's an apologist also, but you can see he was asking questions and speaking like because he knows exactly what people are saying to other people in college and high school and stuff like that. They are saying things like, hey, there is no God, there is creation, I believe in science and stuff like that. So, first of all, he shocked me. I didn't even read that part. It's like atheist debates Christian students, then reveals his true identity. Because what I was going to do is look at his name to see if I can even contact him, because I want to debate him. But then when I looked further and I go, he reveals his true identity. What? He's a Biola. It turns out he's a Biola. Pastor Toby, it turns out he's a Biola a student or a professor at Biola, Bible Institute of Los Angeles. And he's an apologist also. But he went into this high school, claimed himself to be an atheist, and he just started saying, I don't believe in God. And then so they were asking him questions. He was responding to corrections about the multiverse and stuff. Man, that was good. That was good. But nonetheless, I hope that those who are watching the video, whether it's your high school students, college students, elementary students, or whatever, the way he answered the questions were perfect. What is his name? You know what? Let me take a look. Let me see if I can. He reveals who he is here. Here we go.
Compare him. Across these different religions, you find all of these common threads. Why can't I compare them?
So here we go.
All right. Good question. All right, so here's the deal. We're running out of time. So I'm going to take the last 15 minutes and tell you about what I really do. I'm not a philosophy professor. I'm not an atheist. I'm not an atheist. I actually teach at a Christian university in Southern California, a private school called Biola. And I teach at a private Christian school part-time as well, high school Bible. I am married to my high school sweetheart, first met her in 3rd grade, so I'm not a bad guy. I do this a lot at different schools. I believe this story.
All right, let's see.
Have a few questions ready, maybe a few objections waiting, but pretend you're in my class at this moment, because it's going to kind of feel like apologetics in here to some degree, because again, we've got skeptic and believer. So if you would give a great round of applause for my friend Sean as he comes out.
Okay, so his name is Sean.
I'm bringing my friend Sean.
Sean McDowell. Sean McDowell is his name. He's a apologist for Biola, and it's pretty good. This was pretty good. He caught me, and so his name is Sean McDowell. He caught me, and it really got me going. But anyway, hope this video, even whether me answering the questions, attacking Sean here, but really I'm not so much attacking Sean as I'm attacking the questions or the way he answers the questions, and more than that, really attacking a lot of the beliefs that are being taught in our universities today, and how people, what do you call it? Go there. Is it Josh McDowell's son? Really? That's cool to know. I did not know that. Really? That is so funny. I did not know that's Josh McDowell's son. He's the one who wrote the books and Family Life, Family Radio and all this stuff. Wow. So, I praise God. So that was pretty good. That's pretty good. So it allows us again to be able, again, if our college, our high school, our kids understand how to defend the faith, because again, they go to colleges and these college professors, they seem like they are so smart, and they say things like, there is no God. Your God is puny. What are you talking about? And, and our kids don't know how to speak, and they don't know how to defend. And they're like, oh, the multiverse and this and that and that. They need to know how to defend, how to speak the word, and be able to exegete the scripture versus eisegesis. And you can see, again, how a lot of people come up with this, because they don't really, there are a lot of questions that he answered was using eisegesis. He just kind of filled in his own blanks and took it out of context, rather than putting things in context so that they'll be able to answer it. For example, like the young girl, that part. But anyway, that just it was good. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Harlan, thanks for commenting. Pastor Toby, thanks for commenting. If anyone's got a comment, just send it out, question or anything. I'll answer it. I want to do a few videos like this. I've been watching a lot of debates and just listening and things like that, and I just love them. I love these types of discussions. I love these things, and I think that there's a lot of questions that are asked that will enable people at Harvest to grow, because if you're in Harvest, I want you to grow. If you're a Christian, I want you to grow. This is what's so important. Okay? So, he wrote evidence that demands a verdict. Very good. Very good. Thank you, Pastor Toby, for that info. Love you guys. Christ be with you. Again, if you are watching or whatever, come join us for our live thing. Please subscribe to our YouTube station. Subscribe to our Facebook. That way you get notifications and you know that we are on. We buy for Bible studies, live services, commentaries, interviews, all kinds of things that are coming out. Okay? Christ be with you. Good night. God bless you.